Alright, I want to show you an example of how to do one of these game theory problems. Notice that this one has two players, just as usual, Susan and Joe, but this time each player has three choices, LSU, TCU, or Arkansas. You're going to solve these problems exactly the same way if you only had two, if it looked like this, but I'm going to show you this more complicated one, just as a further example. Okay, so the way that you do these problems is first assume that you are one of these players. So first we'll assume that we're Susan. And what you want to do is say, okay, I'm Susan. What's the best thing for me to do? But I don't know what Joe's going to do. So what you should do is look one by one at the possibilities of what Joe may choose and then see what's best for you. So first, assuming that Joe chooses LSU, as Susan, is it better for you to choose LSU, TCU, or Arkansas? The way that we know whether it's better or not is by looking at your payoffs. If Susan picks LSU, she wins 50, TCU, she wins 70, and Arkansas, she wins 65. So here, obviously, Susan's going to want to choose TCU. She can get the most money by choosing that option when Joe plays LSU. Now, what if Joe picks TCU? Then we need to look at this middle column. We're going to do the exact same thing. Compare Susan's payoffs for choosing her three options. So $60, $50, or $80. Susan can win the most money when Joe picks TCU if she picks Arkansas. The last column, the last option that Joe can pick is Arkansas. If he picks Arkansas, Susan can win $60, $100, or $50. $100 is the most that she can win, so Susan would want to pick TCU if Joe picks Arkansas. Now, these questions down at the bottom, I know you can't see in the video, but if you printed this out, then you can see that we're asking, does Susan have a dominant strategy, and does Joe? You can see that Susan does not have a dominant strategy. A dominant strategy means that no matter what the other player does, this player always picks the same thing. That's not true for Susan. She would want to pick TCU if Joe picked LSU or Arkansas. But if Joe picks TCU, she would want to pick Arkansas. She does not have a dominant strategy. Her strategy depends on what Joe does. Okay. Now, let's do the same thing, but assume that we're Joe now. So as Joe, we want to see what's the best option for us to pick depending on what Susan does. So if Susan picks LSU, Joe is going to be looking at this top row and comparing those payoffs. He can win $50, $60, or $75. So in this case, Joe's going to want to pick Arkansas because that's how he gets the most money. What if Susan picks TCU? Then we're looking at this middle row. Joe can win 60, 50, or 100. Here, again, Joe is going to want to pick Arkansas. That gives him the biggest payoff. If Susan picks Arkansas and we're in the bottom row, Joe can win 40 by picking LSU, 30 by picking TCU, and 50 by picking Arkansas. All right, so you can see no matter what Susan does, Joe should pick Arkansas. That means that Joe has a dominant strategy of choosing Arkansas. No matter what Susan does, the best thing he can do is pick Arkansas. That's how he's going to get the most money. Our Nash equilibrium, you can see the Nash is going to be the outcome that you end up where both players, once both players choose their best options. So we're going to end up here. You always list the player on this side's choice first. So TCU, Susan will pick TCU, Joe will pick Arkansas. So TCU, Arkansas is our Nash equilibrium. Both players win $100. I just want to make a note too. So I use these stars as we went through to denote the best option for each player. Some people like to use highlighting or other symbols, and that doesn't matter. You just need to find what works for you as you do these practice problems. The last question on this little worksheet asks, is this a prisoner's dilemma? This is not a prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma occurs when we have a Nash equilibrium, but there's another outcome where both players would be better off. In this case, there's no other combination of choices where both Susan and Joe would win more money. And actually, there's no situation where either one can win more money. So this is not a prisoner's dilemma because both players are doing the best that they can. And that's all for this problem. So try to work this out and do the ones in the book as well.